Hi, and welcome to OurVentura TV. My name is MB Hanrahan, and today my guest is Phil Taggart, Poet Laureate of Ventura County and author of this book, Rick Sings. He's a poet, and he knows it. Phil, thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me, MB.
Well, we'll get to talking about Poet Laureate and what that means and what you all have been doing, but I'd really like to hear a poem, so let's start with that.
Okay, I'm going to read It's a Fall poem, which was my poem I wrote about the fall, the season, but also about an art show called After the Fall, which the Artists Union did. It's like a fall poem. Although it could be after the fall, sort of an Arthur Miller descent, with thematic issues of ethical ambiguity, personal integrity. I'm told winter is coming, but I don't see it. Maybe a hint, a foreshadow. Or the fall itself, all Camus-y, exploring themes of innocence, imprisonment, non-existence, truth. Like when I stand after sitting a while, legs creaky, achy. But maybe to everything there is a season, leaves dying, fluttering in the wind, chromatically pleasing, and that's fall too, colorful in a fallish way. Sometimes I launch my body forward before my legs seem ready, pretty sure they'll catch up.
Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
Wow. Thank you. So, how does one become the Poet Laureate of Ventura County?
Well, the Ventura County Arts Council has a poetry committee, and what they do is they try to find someone to be the Poet Laureate of Ventura County, and someone nominates you.
Okay, so then obviously you did something to get nominated. How about a quick version of how you got here from wherever?
Well, to put it very shortly, in 1991, I helped with a reading at the Insomniac, and it was a weekly reading. And since that time, there has been a weekly reading in Ventura ever since.
Wow! So you were writing poetry way before 1990.
Oh yes, I was.
Did you? I know it sounds kind of silly, but I mean, did you study to be a poet, or how was that awoken in you?
Well, I actually was writing poetry in high school, and it was horrible. But kind of trying to write songs, but mostly trying to be. I read Ginsberg in high school. I read Ferlinghetti. I read Brodigan. I read the Beats, and I was very involved with that. And I read other things too. But so I was interested. Yes.
Contemporary poetry, is that a term? I mean, what you read, it didn't necessarily rhyme, I mean, what?
Well, that's, I write kind of free verse with a little bit of a beat tinge to it on that one particularly.
So what's your West Side Ventura connection?
Well, when I first moved to Ventura, I found my way to the West Side. I lived in Midtown for a very short time. And then I ended up on the West Side. I lived on the Avenue for about 35 years.
Wow, beautiful.
Across from the De Anza.
And how would you say that's informed your art over the years?
Well, I think the Avenue itself was a very comfortable place for me to be, because where I grew up in a place called South Whittier, which is pretty much the same neighborhood, very working class, and that's kind of who I am. Right. So it was very comfortable for me to be there. I felt, oh, these are my people. And so it made it very easy. And then when, of course, there was some difficulty culturally until Art City showed up.
Oh, yay. This book, Rick Sings, Rick's your brother. Mm-hmm. And you guys live on the Avenue, or he's still around the Avenue. So could you just quickly describe a little bit about the actual content of this book?
Well, Rick is my brother. He suffers from schizophrenia. He showed up at my house just about a year or two after I moved to Ventura. He has been part of my life ever since. I tried to have him live with me for a while. That didn't work out, and tried to take care of him in the best way I could through finding therapy for him, finding groups for him. Went as far as I was on the first board of Turning Point Foundation. Just tried to help him. And Rick is a very low functioning, and so I had to kind of keep an eye on him. And at first, he was just showing up in my poetry, and I wasn't even aware of it.
Just from your life experience, because you dealt with them.
And then finally I started writing about him. But writing about him also was writing about his neighborhood. My friend David Oliveira, who we did a lot of poetry events together, and he was asking me, he's from Santa Barbara, he'd come down and visit, and as we were walking down the avenue and onto Main Street, he asked me, why do all the homeless, mentally ill people know you? and they never hit you up for money. And it's like, well, it's my brother. They all know my brother, so they know me. And so I was part of that community.
Right. And I've seen you display photographs with your writing as well. Is that something you're still doing?
Yeah, I'm still doing that. Yeah, I still take pictures of Rick, and I do a lot of videos, poetry videos, and yeah, I'm still doing that.
So speaking of your video work, which it's kind of a two-pronged question I was going to ask you, because it always occurs to me when I'm talking to artists or listening to artists being interviewed, how the heck do they keep the afloat, financially to do this poetry? I mean, do you sell your poetry or what? So talk maybe a little bit about what you do to keep yourself going, and then maybe we can segue into, because I know the answer, to your video work and your latest documentary.
Well, what I do is, first, I'm not a professor. I don't teach at a university, so I don't make money doing poetry. People do not make money doing poetry. Ginsberg had a day job. Most of them do. Not all of them, but most of them do. And so I was fortunate. I've always loved media, so I've been working in television a big chunk of my life, which means I do a lot of video work. I do a lot of writing for the news. I did until the news department for Southern California decided to close. Now I'm at CAPS. But so yeah, that's where I make money.
Okay. And working with knowing film, knowing digital media. So you work with young students, I know that, and then you also create your own documentaries and or short pieces on artists and other things. So why don't you talk a little bit about your documentary, and then if you'd like about the students.
Well, a friend of mine, Glenna Luschei, is this woman who has just finished publishing, just finished celebrating her 50th anniversary as a publisher of poetry. Now, this is remarkable in a couple of ways. It's remarkable, one, that anyone who would do a small poetry publication for 50 years. It's remarkable that anyone would do that. And then, what's more remarkable is that she's a woman. And at the time that she started, women were still using their first initial. They couldn't, so she had to push this all the way through. I mean, she was doing this before the latest feminist thing in the 70s. She was doing this. And so I did a little study of her life, which was the documentary, which I call Between Two Rivers, because she was born between the Missouri and the Mississippi.
Wow. How can people see this documentary?
Well, I've shown it once, and we're going to show it again. We're going to show it around, and at some point it'll end up on my YouTube page, the Askew Poetry Journal YouTube page. Okay, and what's the name of the documentary again? Between Two Rivers. Very good. Okay. How do you involve the community, I'm going to remind you, and youth in poetry, those that are coming up, or anyone, I guess, who wants to be a poet? Well, we have a Thursday night reading at the E.P. Foster Library. It starts at 7:30. Everyone's invited. There's a feature and an open mic. One of the things that I'm wanting to do as Poet Laureate is to set up a youth program where poetry is written outside of the college, outside of the high school, and have it in the community. One of the things that happened in the 90s, which made it a very exciting place to be, is that we actually had writing groups that were outside
Right.
of education.
Just informal workshops.
There were lots of them in Ventura, and I thought, and that is gone.
Oh.
That doesn't exist anymore. And so I've been trying to figure out a way to do that in such a way. Well, things have changed so much. Things have changed much. Economically, things have changed drastically. So there's those places where they could meet don't exist.
So you might be able to use your status as laureate to
That's what I'm going to do.
advertise for this, and also when you work with students, you can tell them about it, and with other educators.
I'm trying to figure out how it's going to work. I mean, it's not, and I've kind of got a sense, looking at how the Santa Cruz Slam team works, how they are how they actually work. They're outside, they're in the community, but they actually work with the writers at UC Santa Cruz. And so you've got the UC Santa Cruz kids on the Slam team, but you also have the street kids, and there's a large street contingency in the Santa Cruz team. So I was kind of looking at that, seeing how that would work, how that could work here. There's a wonderful poet who's doing a lot, or she's a writer, she's not a poet, at Moore Park College, and Sandra Hunter, who does a lot of similar things like that. And I want to work with her, and she's actually part of the Ventura County Arts Council Poetry Committee.
Okay.
And so we're trying to figure out how that can work in a bigger way, because I think it's important.
How do you let the world know about what's going on in Ventura? You've mentioned to me that just the length of time that we've been that you and others have been keeping poetry alive in Ventura. Is there an outreach to the greater community, or?
Well, what I do and how it works is that, for me, is that I, back in the 90s, I started realizing with my friend David Oliveira, when we were running the Santa Barbara series, we were running events in Santa Barbara and Ventura. And so we weren't getting a lot of attention in the press because, well, it's poetry.
Right.
And we don't make any money. And so we realized, we started working with an email list back then, and I still had the same email list. And so I send out all my events, and now with social media, you can find us on, I think there's 2, maybe 3 Facebook pages that have poetry that are about Ventura County poetry. So you can find events. And so we kind of meet that way. And so you can find it that way. And seems to work. Someone is telling me I have to do a Twitter account. I'm not quite sure I'm ready for that yet.
Yeah, maybe see how long Twitter keeps on going. So what would you most like to see happen in your tenure as laureate, and then just in general in your life? Because it may be a couple of years, I'm sure you're going to keep working with or without this title.
Well, I think one of the things that the youth poetry thing I want to do, and then I've got another initiative that I'm putting into place right now is I want to map Ventura County in poetry. I want to go have walking tours all the way around the county, and we do workshops out in the field. And it came from listening to Gary Schneider, and he was talking about land literacy and how important it is to understand where we live. And I thought, why don't I do that? This helps on 2 things. It helps, we get out and we understand what our community is, and we write about it. Of course, the actual physical, the geological thing, but also the cultural.
Right.
And so we walk around and we talk about it. And then we write it down. And the other part of it for me, I want to keep moving so I can live longer. So it's a walking tour to get me out walking.
So we're going to close, but I'd like you to give us a few key words and maybe a website so that people can get in touch with you, because I know they're going to want to. Okay,
well, my website is Phil Taggart, one word, PHILTAGGART.com.
Okay, and Askew Poetry, that's another key word.
We didn't even talk about the Askew Poetry Journal. I actually have a poetry journal we just did our 18th edition.
So Askew, just the way it sounds, ASKEW, Google it.
Yeah, Askew Poetry. You'll find it'll either go to, probably go to the Facebook page.
The time has raced by. Phil, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Keep writing, keep speaking, and you keep listening. Thank you so much. This has been Our Ventura TV. I have been MB Hanrahan. Thank you, Phil Taggart, and we will see you next time.